Synergetic Journal, January 21st through January 22nd, 2026. Christina Herlofson, Synergetics Research Project. At a least disturbed thought language recollective focused moment, metaphysical intellect reassesses relevant points from omni-subconscious to consciousness reconsideration. Its mind-brain re-initiates resolvable conceptioning, satisfying its psyche's omnicomprehensive information processing correlatively with anticipatory design, science, motion, freedoms, and other freedoms in order to generate omniconsiderately conceived centers of an energy rebirth system in the universal communication process that few to none as yet similarly cogitate to any degree of reliability in respect to equilibrium, not yet making any similar connection to the vector equilibrium. Is this because individually our omni-humanity does not consciously know of the various freedoms and the conceptuality of limit cases? Let us not forget to spell what used to be accepted, albeit misunderstood by definition, the word metaphysical now as metaphysical, primarily because the P in physical does not belong in the word metaphysical. Besides, metaphysical experiences from Arbuthnot Fuller's Synergetics Dictionary have no endurance limits, whereas physical is time, is temporal, not eternal. The physical special case always derives from a limit case time-size energy event that begins and ends as its generalization principles. Metaphysical patterning integrity is eternally conserved. With so many different ways to consciously coordinate and convey metaphysical intellect, psyche's perspective points of discernment, its unique one-of-a-kind analyzing personality, and subjective objective philosophy, to receptive others corresponding with sharing a greater clarity. The evolving metaphysical mind must not be mistakenly referred to as soul, S-O-U-L, or spirit. Soul, S-O-U-L, and spirit are incorrect, inaccurate nomenclature that always runs afoul in the human event conditions by supplanting clearest clarifications of our human design by eternal omniscient mind in principle. That's Yom. The nature of our evolving species, humans of the eternal mind, must differentiate mind from brain. When using the wrong word soul, S-O-U-L, or spirit, instead of metaphysical mind, this tends to generate aberrations played out in the human condition, as the human imagination can veer off into subconsciously adapted credences of indoctrinating inculcations, further misleading metaphysical intellect, trapping its variously identifiable freedoms with labyrinthine degrees of ramifying culminating factors that initially derived from self-other invalidating PRJWBCHM contextual parameters, politics, religion, justice, war, belief, complex, hierarchical matrix, PRJWBCHM. Since otherness plays a great part in the evolving universal communication process, TEUCP, what in the universe is prime otherness? In quotes, zero is prime otherness, end quote. Who would have thought that such a clarification demands identification of what humans, if ever, give any conscious thought as the entity integrity. Our humanity's 21st century generations can explore and expand our individually integral cosmic to local information gathering, information sorting, information storing, and information restoring proclivities in Synergetics 540.06. This synergetic section informs us that only at the tetrahedron stage of generalizable entity interrelationships is metaphysical intellect's anticipatory design science cognition recognition discovery to convey operationally valid generalized conceptioning fields pertaining to omnirational governing systems and consciously disseminated generalized content when forming a more perfect union. In this entirety, the intelligence of it cannot mistakenly derive from a matrix that omits by default slave mentality conditioning awareness of prime rational integer characteristics, Synergetics 223.41. Is it only my intuition that recognizes intricacies in the synergetics geometry of thinking as challenges that the 20th century innovators of internet technology confronted when their engineering skills opted for predominantly money-driven website innovations that may or might not have anticipated AI technology? Nevertheless, the internet ushered in artificial intelligence, AI, further propagating 21st century self-other least economic deceptions and self-other invalidations that became exceedingly attractive to governing agencies. The culminating oversights, coupled with long-established irrational imbalances, where profit motivations seem always to attract fraud within the offices of elected officials who cultivate self-interest regardless of their initial highest ideals and loyalties to the nation before entering the governmental systems. Could the PRJ, WBC, HM vices in quagmires of inherited detrimental self-interest of such enormous powerful controls that suppress virtues as knowledge of freedom forever conceal UIVMOFCH, universe, isotropic vector matrix, operational field, cosmic hierarchy, as an alternative way? The turn of the century into this third decade of 21st century survives for the anticipatory design science individual economic initiatives explored now in my Synergetic journal. Restarting a consciously coordinated thought-language communication process can be accomplished without having first to factor in such debased ambitions that consort against a democracy forming a more perfect union. Now that we have Bucky Fuller's Synergetics explorations in the geometry of thinking to explore, the discovery process includes a definition of wealth that need not be confused with exploitations and profiting at the people's expense. Listed in the Synergetics Dictionary under Wealth, January 28, 1975, in quotes, wealth includes the accommodation of man's proclivities, degrees of freedom, and needs for information, end quote. This goes without saying until reading the words initiates consciously coordinated awareness and clarification that do not need mindlessly to accept any newly elected administration's quasi-democracy, that unquestionably exploits the value of doing harm, profiting at the people's expense and absences of forethought, that rationalizes ignorance while perpetuating oversight as an excuse to continue the deception. It can make you wonder what the purpose of habitually forming congressional committees, Senate investigations, elaborate lawmaking protections where everything leads back to the PRJWBCHM until UIVMOFCH comes into the playing field as an alternative technology, especially concerning the prospects of conceptualizing a cosmic democracy within the ongoing intention to form a more perfect union. Does a more perfect union individually inspire our omni-humanity to consciously know of the various freedoms and the conceptuality of limit cases? We can read of this in Synergetics 1006.12. The mathematical limit case is a conceptuality of the closest packed symmetry. The uniradius spheres inadvertently capture all previously unidentified otherness of universe. The inscrutability of it in synergetics interpretation is called space. Where otherwise do we hope to conceive of symmetry, the symmetrically discrete differentiation? In any case, it requires domain awareness and geometric models correlating to concave and convex individualizable phases of comprehensibility. Surely this is different in its entirety from congressional committees closest associated in opposing sides as the political perspective continues the least economic practices. Provided with the conceptuality of a nuclear uniradius sphere or as closest packed spheres around a nucleus-free prime volume domain, our consciously evolving mentalities are liberated from the onerous tasks that habitually resort to blame or devising cover-up strategies. One such culmination is shown in YouTube movies and TV, The Report. The movie is based on actual events created in the aftermath of 9/11 World Trade Center attack. What a domain constitutes ought to be common knowledge by the third decade of the 21st century. As we can read of this in Synergetics 445.04, with vector equilibrium in mind as initial unity 20, respecting tetrahedral unity of 1, the total volumetric domain is unique to any universal focus or point. If systems are domains of volume, what is the domain of the most economically managed anticipatory design science Congress and Senate? These rudimentary questions and answers ought to be known way in advance. Of the internet technology that devises domain names and qualifying extensions like .com, .org, .edu, and so forth, as if those technological computer inventions and innovations come to mind before forming a government that intends becoming a more perfect union. Obviously, the language is cockamamie and bound to become increasingly more unreasonable, preposterous, absurd. From Synergetics 536.10, in quotes, domains are systems, but not structures, end quote. Without knowledge of structural patterning, conceptualities and integrities differentiated from system, it is impossible to form a cosmic democracy, much less expect that the existing forms of government everywhere in the world could eventuate in forming a more perfect union. Perhaps we will find unity, which relates to omnidirectionally realizable experience, where unitary totality is implicit in the law of conservation of energy, a regenerating value that ought to precede forming any government system. Consciously coordinating a government system's unity is decidedly more compatible with forming an omnirational democracy that seems to supplant the word union now in order to incorporate essential nomenclature correlatively with ushering in UIVMOFCH, universe, isotropic, vector, matrix, operational field, cosmic hierarchy. The engineering of its universal communication network obviously will generate everything differently from the predominantly commercialized internet, with a consciously coordinated concern for the governing systems to responsibly precede any inherited detriments, thereby not having to factor the asymmetries into the information gathering and local problem solving processes. Until next time, gratefully, faithfully, eternally, Christina Herlofson.